My name is Eamon Flack. I'm the Artistic Director here at Belvoir. This is the Philip Parsons Lecture, and we're also going to announce the Philip Parsons Award at the end. This particular event predates my time here by quite some time. Philip Parsons was one of the great champions of Australian theatre. With Catherine Brisbane, he founded Currency Press. But he was also a great thinker and a great teacher. He took his teaching to the point where he created great experiments in how to approach text. Can we? I was going to say, can't turn the lights down because then I'll be in the dark. I just can't see anybody. But Philip was, I never knew Philip, but I've known Catherine for a long time. And this lecture is in Philip's memory because he was a great champion of ideas and of the particular strengths and possibilities of Australian theatre, and of doing things in ways that the product... Isn't my microphone gone now, is it? Oh, I see. Oh, there we go. Thanks. I wish I could say I'd rehearsed that. Catherine, I hope Philip would have enjoyed that introduction. Introducing Alana Valentine is both kind of very easy and very difficult. I've known Alana since I first started at this company many years ago, and as a very young man, a play crossed my desk that had been commissioned by the company that was called Parramatta Girls. And what struck me at the outset about Alana's work was her ability to take real life and find not just the kind of grace of struggle that I think is one of the things that theatre does so beautifully, but also to kind of sit inside the experiences of people who wouldn't imagine that the stage might attempt to honour their struggles in their lives. And that has been Alana's great gift, I think, not just to our stages and to our actors, but also to the many, many communities that she has worked with and the many, many people whose stories she's told. And it's this particular ability to take life and honour it that I think is what is so especially beautiful about Alana's work. She's worked here at this company many times, most recently with the Sugar House. She co-wrote Barbara and the Camp Donks with Ursula Jovic, Parramatta Girls those many years ago. The thing that is most striking as well about Alana is that she doesn't stop. I don't know of a more prolific playwright working in Australia today. Alana has worked from like all over, from Darwin Festival to Belvoir Street, Canberra Street Theatre, Griffin. I know that what we were saying before, that you have caught a helicopter to a bulk carrier. She's climbed an interstellar radio dish in order to write plays. She has worked with sex workers who are trying to move out of the business at Lou's Place. This particular strange combination of exploring life makes her, I think, both the Indiana Jones and the Helen Garner of Australian playwriting. We were thinking about who ought to do this particular lecture at this point, back when Sugar House was in rehearsals earlier this year. And it wasn't just that Alana was around, it was the fact that I was struck once again watching Sugar House, as I had been the very first time I encountered Alana's work with Parramatta Girls, at how well Alana knows her audience. Moment to moment within the play and within the production, her ability to speak very directly to the people who sit here is extraordinary. The only other playwright who has that particular quality is sitting right next to her, Tommy Murphy. And I think it's an exquisite ability for a writer to have. And I marvelled at it, watching Alana's work on Sugar House unfold, both through the drafts and then sitting and watching the play night after night in this house. Her ability to speak beyond the flashiness of what theatre often requires, the entertainment value. Her ability to kind of talk very directly to the sort of quieter experiences of the audience, especially of the quieter parts of the audience, is what I think is most beautiful about Alana's writing. And when I asked her if she would like to do this particular lecture, I was thrilled when she said she'd like to talk about the audience. So ladies and gentlemen, Alana Valentine.
My favourite audience reactions: a sudden, sharp intake of breath, a roar of laughter, the snuffle of tears, a person who forgets where they are and answers back to an actor on stage. Spontaneous applause within a scene, a heckle, a jeer, a groan, a deepening of silence that goes beyond the absence of words, a standing ovation, the stamping of feet, a gush of words in the foyer, words tumbling over themselves to try to convey how moved, how changed, how engaged a person has been with the show. Chris McQuaid is on this stage in May this year in the Sugar House, when in exasperation she picks up a butter knife and stabs it into her hand. The audience gasp, but Chris has stuck it in so hard that it immediately pops straight back out of the wound. The audience titter nervously. It is a gesture of irrational self-harm, a moment of enraged madness that by definition can't be repeated. But the scene also can't go on without the knife in her hand. What to do? The audience hold its breath. Chris picks up the knife and sticks it in again. The audience rent the air. Some clap their hands against their mouths, and then their mouths fall open as she struggles from the stage. Me, I couldn't see for the rest of the second act for laughing. I was still laughing as I lay in bed that night trying to sleep. Oh, how I love an audience. Of them I am likely to rave. Oh, how I love an audience in a room in the dark with a stage. Theatre makers, we are the ones who put on a show. We are the ones who want others to see what we have made. What makes us happy is not only the capacity to do a somersault from standing position into midair, but getting someone to witness us doing that. If an actor falls on a stage and no one is there to see them, we are the tribe who can all collectively agree that that is a crying shame. Again, the Sugar House with Chris McQuaid and Josh McConville. Josh, as the crazy brave Ollie, has just admitted to his mother June that he's been receiving stolen goods. Chris, his mother, is a woman haunted by her own bad blood criminal family, and she wants to know who he's got the gear from. Big guy. I don't know, says Ollie. Len or Ken. And that's when I hear it, a sudden sharp intake of breath from the audience, a moment of shared horror, a moment when every mother and father in the audience identify with June and react in fear. They are guessing who she means. And when she confirms it, when she says Lenny McDobber-Ferson has come after my son, I swear you could feel the audience recoil. And in that moment, I understood for the first time just how terrifying that person really was. It was a moment of shared anticipation that no amount of dramaturgical build in the structure of the drama could match. When I went backstage after the show, Lex Marinos, one of the cast, grabbed me and said excitedly, they knew who she meant, a big guy. It was thrilling. And not just for the older people in the audience who had lived through the times in Sydney when there were thugs and criminals who could strike fear into people by the mere mention of their name. For all the audience, I say, even those who didn't know who Lenny McPherson was, because in an audience, we hear and are affected by the reaction of people around us. When I started working on Parramatta Girls, all these people would say to me, oh yes, my mother threatened to send me there if I was naughty. An actor in the cast casually mentioned the subject of my play to her mother, and she admitted that she was sent there herself and had never told her daughter. For the second preview of Parramatta Girls, the Department of Community Services, DOCS, had been persuaded by Bonnie Jurek of the Paragirls support group to pay for 70 preview tickets for ex-inmates of the Parramatta Girls' home. Young women incarcerated because they were charged with being uncontrollable. At the end of the first act, the character Marlene, played by Leah Purcell, enters and sees that the gate to the home has been left open by the garbage men. She runs to tell another girl called Kerry, played by Lisa Flanagan. Kerry says, come on, let's go. Kerry bolts out of there, but Marlene just stands rooted to the spot. It's a scene about how when you're institutionalised, it's not just the walls that keep you locked up. It's a scene about how you carry the walls within you. Well, the ex-Parramatta inmates in the preview audience are having none of that. "You go, girl," they shout. "Get out of there, get out of there now." I'll never forget the look on Leah's face as she stood on stage, knowing that the script required her to stay, but so wanting to metaphorically fulfil the long-held desire of every ex-inmate in that audience to escape. She didn't go. Instead, the presence of these women in the house utterly transformed her performance and that of all 8 in the cast. It was as if they became the Parramatta girls after that preview. Their disrespect and toughness was unleashed, vivid in all its wildness and fury. During the interval for that transformative preview, a Belvoir subscriber stopped a member of the creative team and said, "Can you ask those women to be quiet? They're spoiling the show." To which he replied, "Well, really, they are the show." Last week, when I was working on a play about people married at the Wayside Chapel in King's Cross, the director said, "I never knew my sister-in-law was married there. I went to a party that night. I was talking to a man I'd never met before. Oh yeah, Ted Knopf's," he said. It's like there's this history swimming under the surface, this history that no one mentions till an artist makes us notice it. A great artesian basin of knowledge and experience, the stuff of life that is shared, that exists buried deep in the minds and hearts of the audience until a sudden, sharp intake of breath brings it back into the present. The priority of my work as a playwright has been and continues to be the deep engagement of local audiences with Australian drama, a recognition that goes beyond a sentimental familiarity with place names and nostalgia. It's a complex contract that what is being seen on stage is going to be about a life and a world the audience might know, or if not, might delight in knowing. And there is in that perception something beyond a cosy familiarity. In fact, it can be quite the opposite, because in it can be the shock of immediacy, a reality from which you cannot distance yourself, where the sometimes ugly truth is not shielded from being directly about you. But there is also in it a profound certainty that because the lives of the people on stage matter for the next 2 hours, then so does yours. It's both a confirmation and a confrontation because precisely the people on the stage are in some way like you. What I do as a playwright is get people into the theatre who will extend the story that the actors are telling on the stage out into the house, beyond the fourth wall and into an elusive, never entirely cohesive, but a connected, collective audience response. What I always aim to do is give to the audience an experience where they move beyond the isolation of being an individual and seem, even momentarily, to think and feel and perceive as a community. It's intricate what I'm trying to name because I'm not suggesting that we abandon either our individual intelligence or identity in that moment. I'm not talking about being subsumed into the mob, but I am talking about creating the conditions where an audience can experience the simultaneous nature of both the self and the group. That, for me, is great live theatre. Earlier this year, I was on tour with actors in the Northern Territory of Australia. They did a show. The production manager and stage manager packed up the van for Colin, our roadie, to drive away through the night before us. We slept, and the next morning we followed Colin's path to the next venue for the stage manager and production manager to unpack and rig the set before the next show. And then we did it again and again and again. 21 venues over 3 months, 3 states and the Northern Territory. They've brought the writer along because I'm conducting writing workshops on the day before the play. This offers us connection with the local writing community in each of the towns we visit, and I offer them my experience and engagement with their own artistic ambitions. The play we're touring is Letters to Lindy, a 2-act drama about the 20,000 or more letters that the public wrote to Lindy Chamberlain Creighton, which she has carefully archived and which I have spent about 5 years reading, transcribing, finding the copyright owners for, and compiling into a play. The dramatic spine of the work is a verbatim monologue in Mrs. Chamberlain Creighton's own words. Letters to Lindy premiered for Merrigong Theatre Company in July 2016, with Lindy, her husband Rick Creighton, and son Regan Chamberlain in attendance. At the end of the play, Lindy accompanied me to the stage to face a heartfelt standing ovation. Later on in the foyer, Lindy went to the microphone and said, "This is the most powerful thing that has been done on my story and the most true to what I lived through." Lindy was at the show in Darwin when we played to nearly 1,000 people in the Darwin Entertainment Centre. They told us that they'd never had to open the dress circle for a play before. "You mean an Australian play?" I said. "Any play," they told me. At the end of that incredible show, in the city that had incarcerated this innocent woman, this grieving mother, for more than 3 years, these 1,000 people stood up as Lindy Chamberlain Creighton took the stage. They responded to this theatrical opportunity to collectively give back, to collectively face what was done, to absolve the past in some small but important way. It is one thing to learn that 1,000 people every year care enough to still write to Lindy 38 years after Azaria was taken. It's quite another to be in a room full of 1,000 people letting go of their shame. Why? Because I think we have an identity which is beyond our individuality. We have an identity which we hold in concert with our knowledge of our specific, isolated, and sometimes selves. And sometimes, if the play is good, we may be able to enter into that identity in a collective sense. Unfortunately, sometimes, if the media and the mood and the collective mentality is bad and seeks to whip us up into a herd, we enter into a group sensibility that is destructive and irrational and sometimes even murderous. What was it that happened in early 80s Australia that saw a woman sent to jail for life for supposedly murdering a baby that was unquestionably taken by a dingo? We acted as a jury and a legal system and a culture to do that. And yet I was asked in the Territory by someone working in the arts, why did I feel the need to bring this shameful chapter up again? Why did I need to remind people of what was done to her? What good can come of that? They said to me. When I replied that she might like to think of the show as an opportunity to give something back, there was a confused shake of the head. "You are here to sell us tickets, and for that you promised to entertain us," she said. "No," I replied, "we are here to witness ourselves and other people changing their minds, to transform not only what was done by us, but to us, to be carried back into forgiveness and release or any other response we might individually make of it." In 2018, nearly 2019, I would like to take an idea out for a walk. The idea that there no longer is, if there ever was, such a thing as a general audience. I think it is a myth that can only exist alongside the myth of a monoculture. I suggest that the myth of the general audience must go the way of the myth of the normal person, the myth of the average Australian. You wouldn't walk into a cafe and order a standard coffee. You're unlikely to talk about a traditional voter. Are we not part of a generation whose success has been to interrogate all forms of generalisation? So why do we continue to refer to a general audience? And please, I'm not taking issue with the nature of the adjective as a collective descriptor. I'm actually leaning into the definition of general as imprecise, inexact, sweeping and vague. I'm questioning what it is that we refer to when we say general. I'm also not being pejorative or seeking to denigrate the audience that we already have in our theatres by refusing to call them general. I am not, as I sometimes hear non-theatre goers say, "Oh, but the audience for theatre is very samey." And I say, no, it's not. You haven't never go to the theatre or you wouldn't say that. Sometimes if I'm feeling really combative, I say, "Not at my plays, Nellie." Or if I've been home alone too long, I'll ask in a small voice, how can you know a person's age, class or cultural heritage just by looking at them? You'd have to look at the Australia Council's last National Arts Participation Survey, published in June 2017. And then you'd really be able to argue with me, because although the overview records brightly that 98% of Australians engage with the arts and more people recognise the positive impact of the arts, there are some sobering findings as well. Yes, there have been general increases in all the markers of people's attitude to the impact of the arts, an increase in the sense that the arts add to our well-being and happiness, an increase in the sense that the arts shape Australian identity, an increase in the sense that the arts enhance our ability to think creatively, develop new ideas and express ourselves. But scroll down and engage with a tricky little date bar on the figures and you can find an alarming statistic that's been declining in leaps and bounds. In 2009, 85% of people thought that the arts should receive public funding. In 2013, it was 79%. In 2016, it is at 66%, and that was 3 years ago. Not good. And then there is a curious, quite offensive statistical line. The arts tend to attract people who are somewhat elitist or pretentious. I thought, that's going to have to have gone down. The cultural cringe is the thing of the past. Hold your breath. In 2009, it was 33%, about a third of people. 2013, 30%, less than a third. 2016, it was up to 43%, almost half. What's going on? Maybe this is a perfect example of something I call confirmation bias that I've been learning about in data analysis. That is, people might just agree because of the fact that a question about elitism and pretension is even there in the survey confirms such an attitude. For the last year, I've had a fellowship at the Charles Perkins Centre, a world-class science facility at the University of Sydney, so I know that you can misinterpret data, in that case, scientific findings, and in this case, audience participation statistics. I know that it is dangerous for a layperson such as myself to be let loose on such data, unsupervised. But let's stop making or allowing others to make derogatory or negative remarks about the age, culture or gender of our current theatre goers. These are our loyal audience, the people who I know as intelligent, nuanced in their understanding of the world, attracted to ideas and interested in people and things other than themselves. And yes, many of them are opsimaths, and so as to prevent you reaching for your smartphone, that means one who learns late in life. But they are also many other things that you can't tell from statistics. I suppose what I'm trying to posit in interrogating the general audience as a myth is to ask what are the specific qualities of theatre goers that make them anything but general, and how might we attract more community members with those qualities to our theatre spaces, not just along age, culture or gender lines, but along content of their character lines, boldness of their vision, depth of their community spirit lines. Orhan Pamuk, the great Turkish novelist, writes that novels are unique structures that allow us to keep contradictory thoughts in our minds without uneasiness and to understand differing points of view simultaneously. It's a great description of drama, and I think of our ideal audience, those who can keep contradictory thoughts in their minds without uneasiness and understand differing points of view simultaneously. I was not the child who dragooned their relatives into sitting on the couch, turning off the TV and watching their children put on a play. That is not my story. But it is a memory I have heard told so many times by so many people in the theatre that I sort of long to make it my own. To be one of that imaginary group of children playing dress up, leaping out of wardrobes and from behind sofas, to be clapped indulgently by attentive parents. I still want that. For the quietly listening audience to psychically cross that liminal space between the stage and the house, to explore work that continues my process of delighting with meaning the established theatre goers and has them muck in with the wild card of an engaged, sometimes vocal, often new to theatre crowd. The relationship between the audience and the stage can be savagely intimate. It can be coldly distant. It can be more fragile than faith. It can be as strong as love. It is alive with all the mystery and tedium and horror and incandescent joy of breathing in and out right now, breathing deeply and regularly, daring to be extreme and uncompromising, choking sometimes on our own hyperbole, or slayed with despair when our endeavours, our artistry is not understood, crippled with regret when we have been blunted or stale, when we have preferred delusional hope to discipline, when we have believed our own publicity and skated along an intellectual surface, surprised that the cracks have sent our audience falling through into the ice-cold water of banality. People often ask artists if they think about the audience. They mostly reply, no, not really. I do what I want and then let the audience make what they want of it. But that's a very different to a kind of snobbish indifference to the audience, a kind of hierarchy of artistic taste that infers that the audience should simply be grateful for the superior aesthetic sensibilities of the artists. Yes, we have an obligation to be innovative and daring and disruptive and invite audiences to follow us in that. But in 2018, anywhere in the world, arguing that audiences should simply attend because of some notion of culture as educative and refining for a particularly exclusive monocultural class is no longer sustainable. As artists, we must take into our bodies and minds and spirits the collective concerns of our communities alive today. I've spent a lot of time in the Northern Territory of Australia. I love the spirit of country that comes up out of the earth through the soles of your feet when you're standing on that sovereign Aboriginal land. In January 2008, I directed a public reading of my play Watermark in the Catherine Cinema as a commemoration for the 10th anniversary of the 18-metre flood that had literally wiped the town off the face of the earth. There were 18 community performers, and we decorated the stage with a line of blue silk cloths to represent the flooding waters. I will never forget the moment, almost toward the end of the play, remembering the people who had died as a result of the floodwaters. Using the transcript from the Territory Parliament, it named the people and detailed the circumstances of their deaths. At the time, the parliamentarian reading this had asked his fellow politicians to stand for a minute's silence. I included it as an authentic part of the record. We had asked a few people associated with the cast to stand at this moment in the reading to see if it might encourage others in the audience to do the same. Almost before the invitation to stand was issued, the entire house got to its feet and stood, silent, respectful, grateful to be able to respond to the pain and heartbreak outlined. It was a precious moment that anyone who works in theatre will know well. That moment when the work of art becomes a conduit for a spontaneous community expression. It's not a moment you can plan or control, but you can set up the conditions for it before you surrender to a phenomenon much bigger than yourself. I have had that moment so many times in my career. The closing night of Run Rabbit Run on this stage, when at the very end of the work, a riot happened only a few streets away in Redfern, unknown to the cast and the assembled house. But those who were there that night and learnt later of what happened would swear that some gremlin of the madness and delirium from that event crept down this road and into the audience at Belvoir, who went absolutely nuts that night as if Souths had actually won the grand final, as they were to do years later. It was there during the whole run of Ladies' Day at Griffin Theatre. On the opening night, I stood arm in arm with gay men still living out and proud in Broome. It was a play that acknowledged domestic violence and rape within gay relationships, so it gained the supportive response of many in the gay community. But it also attracted an incredibly young and vocal audience. Young women especially wrote to me about their pain of demeaning their own abuse for fear it was comparatively inconsequential. I just think the determination of this generation to call out abuse of any kind is utterly inspiring. When my play Head Full of Love, set at the Alice Springs Beanie Festival about kidney disease, was produced in Darwin, the after-show audience gave generously to a fund we raised for the Purple House, the Western Desert Nyampa Walcha Palinjaku Jutaka Aboriginal Corporation, where I'd done my research. The actors Colette Mann and Roxanne MacDonald collected $60,000 in after-show donations and gave it back to the Central Desert Mob Fund, the Purple House, to fund a mobile kidney dialysis machine called the Purple Truck that drove out to country. In 2011, I worked with a Redfern community organisation and the Blue Knot Foundation, then known as Adults Surviving Child Abuse. I conceived a public performance where the reader would be unknown and I could not control who would perform. As audience members took their seats, it was explained that they would be asked to participate in the performance by electing to step up and read testimonial transcripts of child sexual abuse. This created an astonishing tension and unity in the house. We watched people come up from the audience to read the stories of survivors. Sometimes they'd cry and struggle to find the courage to go on, but then they would create self-esteem in themselves by being active in their own healing. Not knowing whether the readers were abuse survivors or family or friends was a metaphor for the way in which child abuse lives all around us, unseen and unacknowledged in the lives of adults, while having its destructive, debilitating effect. It is the rare, unifying, utterly intangible response of the audience during or after the performance that makes me want to keep writing for theatre. It still has to work with metaphor and suspense and humour and the kinds of contradictions that come from lived experience, not ideological dogma. I am sometimes confused by people who dismiss audience-focused or community-engaged art as worthy and not 100 times as artistically disciplined as any other form of theatre. I suppose what confuses me is the kind of argument that goes something like, yes, but all the things you're talking about, Alana, all the audience members who are part of the community of interest or people in the show or have some engagement with the theme of the show or behave in a rowdy or differently engaged way, that's just ephemeral. You're not doing that. You don't control who comes to the show and gives the audience that specific experience. But I think you can strategise for a very specific audience cocktail when you are thinking about writing a show. I do think about the people it will attract and how they might affect the character of the audience. To say that I'm not mixing my palette with the audience as one of the ingredients is actually incorrect. Just as a visual artist who anticipates that their work is going to factor in people touching it or sitting on it or dressing in it thinks about the interaction factor, all I'm saying is so do I. And then when the play delivers that warmth and that playfulness and heart and bounty of engagement and cultural diversity, that is what myself and my theatre collaborators have been aiming for. I hope that community-engaged theatre professionals will continue to be recognised as artistically innovative with the courage to elicit change in the character and content of the audience, lauded as serious a form of artistic rebellion as changes to the theatrical elements and performance style. I hope that arts criticism and journalism might also investigate responses from the community of interest about the ideas being interrogated and elucidate how particular subcultures and informed audiences might understand the work differently. At the end of the first preview of Barbara and the Camp Dogs here at Belvoir, the audience stood. And we all went home, and I and Ursula Jovic, who co-wrote and performed the play, were so relieved and delighted down to our bones, but we thought, maybe it was a particularly nice house. And then at the second preview in the audience was Ripple Effect, an all-girl band from Maningrida, some of whom were Ursula's cousins and countrymen. And all through the show they were calling out and clapping. Toward the end they came down on the stage and danced all through the encore as if they were in a pub. And the energy leaked into the audience from the show, and by the end everyone was on their feet dancing, and we thought, oh yes, but that might just be because of the Arnhem Land mob. And then it happened again on the third preview because there were more countrymen in and the energy of the early previews was flowing back from the band and the performers to the audience. And then again they stood on the opening because it was just so joyful watching Ursula and Elaine and Troy and that band. And then on every single sold-out show for 3 weeks, full of old rockers and young funksters and people who love live music and music people who don't usually rate songs in plays, and so many others new to this theatre and loyal to this theatre. If you want to see illustrated what I'm talking about when I say to feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself, it is most surely there in Letitia Kasseri's production of Barbara and the Camp Dogs. When no one would give me access to their audiences in Sydney, when the ratio of male to female playwrights on stage was abominable back in the bad old days, about 4 years ago, during all those years, I was lucky enough to be employed by regional companies in the Northern Territory by Joe Duffy, and the Darwin Festival in Canberra by Caroline Stacey at the Street Theatre, and by Simon Hinton at the Merrigong Theatre in Wollongong. Those regional companies and many others all over Australia are doubtless doing some of the most innovative work for their audiences in the Australian theatre landscape. And by working with them, I have developed a keen eye for how to ready regional audiences to attend plays that they might initially think are not for them. How to tempt those audiences into paying for seats on shows that are enthusiastically embraced by radical regional tastemakers and go on to tour Australia. The Australia Council for the Arts November 2017 research summary, The Arts in Regional Australia, concluded that the vast majority of people living in regional Australia recognise positive impacts of the arts in their lives and are only a very little less inclined to acknowledge the positive impact of the arts, 84%, than those in metropolitan areas, 86%. 7 in 10 people in regional Australia believe the arts have a big or a very big impact on stimulating their minds, 68%. Almost 7 in 10 believe the arts impact their ability to express themselves, 67%, up from 60% in 2013. 65% believe the arts impact their ability to think creatively and develop new ideas, up from 57% in 2013. 57% believe the arts impact our sense of well-being and happiness, up from 52% in 2013, and 57% believe the arts shape and express Australian identity, up from 44% in 2013. The regions are so punching above their weight when it comes to audience development, it's positively electrifying. I have had so many intellectually vivid discussions with regional artistic directors and venue managers about how they are continuing to engage their audiences with art. One of the most revealing was not just about the myth of the general audience, because one AD described every regional show as a completely bespoke audience, but another talked in revelatory terms about the dangers of burdening the young audience with the responsibility of being a kind of saviour of the theatre, of how young theatregoers are of course vitally important, but that it is utterly lazy thinking to assume that all audience members of a particular age are the same or will want the same sort of show. In regional companies, they talk about a sophisticated notion that audiences can be divided not along age lines, but along what they call psychometric lines, perhaps using the 5 big psychological traits that are now used for election campaigns. Apparently, they are openness, contentiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. I think it is interesting, even for a playwright, to understand that your work may be aimed at the adventurous in life of any age, might be aimed at the worriers and prophets of life, of any sexual preference, might be enjoyed by the peacemakers of a diversity of cultural backgrounds, might appeal to the fun-time lovers beyond gender or geographical postcode. There are still too many people who are simply too intimidated to enter a theatre. I would love it if general audience really meant a collective of infinitely different Australians and others from all corners and walks and aspects of contemporary Australian society. I'm calling it because I think vaguely referring to the general audience becomes an excuse for not thinking about who the audience is, for not working to augment freedom of speech and freedom of association, which we still so preciously have in this country, with the human right of a genuine range of people to see themselves on a public stage. I want to finish with a provocation to my fellow artists about audience. Whose engagement are you really interested in? Who do you really work for? Me? I wouldn't have spent this much time and done this much work if I was just trying to realise my personal creativity or liberate my individual vision. If you're one of us, one of the tribe who want to go to the theatre or want to make theatre, it's because you can't understand what it is to be in the world without feeding it through the body and mind and spirit and longing of a theatre artist. You just can't get your bearings unless you see aspects of your life played out on a public stage so that you get the chance to really open your eyes. Our job is to bring the utterly overwhelming beauty of the world the frightening fragility with which we maintain our freedoms in this country onto the public stage for examination in a sufficiently entertaining and rousing way that it can endow the future with the legacy of us. And my argument is that if you keep calling it a general audience, perversely that leads to a pool that is too narrow, too limited, too habituated to be as effective as we need it to be to go forward into our future. I'm not saying that you have to take responsibility for getting the entire audience in if you're the writer. Every writer of colour and every writer of difference knows what it's like to suddenly be expected to get in an audience from their cultural group. Because I'm a lesbian, I do happen to know a lot of homosexuals and parents of homosexuals and sons and daughters and sisters and brothers and non-binary offspring and siblings of homosexuals and neighbours and godchildren and nieces and nephews and cousins and work colleagues of homosexuals and differently abled homosexuals and their friends and so many First Nations titters and religious people who support homosexuals. I also know a lot of rugby league fans and incarcerated women and men, and marine pilots and beanie makers and sex workers and international students and Jewish Australian entrepreneurs and Afghan Australian female engineers and Maori, Papua New Guinean and First Nations singers and men and women living in big bodies and chocolate, wine and tea connoisseurs and pro and anti-nuclear activists. And so to finish, I give a shout out to all of you people. All of you have come to see my shows over the years. Thank you, darlings. And of course, I want to add that if you don't come to the next one, you are dead to me. I'm not saying that writers need to become soul Pied Pipers wrangling in the rainbow tribes of our wonderfully complex contemporary culture, but as these stories are told more and more by writers and actors and directors from a range of perspectives and identities using other languages and theatrical traditions, I trust they will bring in new audiences, as I have done. The world will follow joy, the poet Alice Walker tells us, if you love strange and fresh and pluralistic audiences as I do, and if you work to get out into our theatre people who've never been part of an audience ever before, I promise you it will be one of the most beautiful gifts you can give to another human being, to take them with you to a live event and experience it together. The best part, the part everyone enjoys, is the bit at the end where the audience breaks into rapturous applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Alana. Hello, everyone. My name is Louise Goff. I'm the head of new work at Belvoir. Soon I'm going to welcome Tommy Murphy to the island, and he'll have the honour of announcing the Philip Parsons Fellowship for Early Career Playwrights. The award is in memory of the late Dr. Philip Parsons, a really deeply influential teacher and mentor to many young theatre artists. I'd like to acknowledge those here who knew him and remember him. The fellowship is an integral part to our new work strategy at Belvoir, and part of our ongoing artistic activities and our deep, deep commitment to new Australian work. We support the fellow with a commission and artistic support to develop the work over the course of that commission. I'd like to thank every writer who submitted this year, and a special acknowledgement to those here who were shortlisted. It's tremendous to have the opportunity to read and consider new work. I'd also like to thank the Belvoir staff, the boss, Eamon, Carissa Licciardello and Dom Mercer, and our external assessment panel of Kate Box and Emmy Hoy, who worked with us to select this year's fellow. Many of you, or some of you may know, I'm newly back to theatre after being in the dark arts of screen, and it is the dark arts, and I'm newish to Belvoir. It really is an exciting time to be in theatre and to be working in new work. There's such a breadth and depth of stories to be told, and I believe that Belvoir's a lightning rod for those stories. It's an urgent time to gather and tell stories to each other that are deep and that are wide. Of course, we can't support our new work without incredible supporters and partnerships that we have shared values with. For example, the Balnaves Foundation, Philip Bushell, Playwriting Australia, the Copyright Agency, individuals such as Anita Jacoby, the Creative Development Fund, of course government partners, the Australia Council for the Arts and Create New South Wales, and particularly the Australian Writers Guild with the David Williamson Prize. I'd love to welcome Tommy Murphy. He's a past recipient of the Parsons and the AWG David Williamson Prize last year, which comes about because of David and Kristen Williamson and Shane and Catherine Brennan's commitment to new Australian voices and to putting the writer at the centre of work. In my role as the head of new work here at Belvoir, I have what I believe is a deep privilege where I have the opportunity to walk alongside writers as they're developing work. And one gets to learn and experience a lot, and you get to witness a work being made and hopefully contribute positively to it. Tommy is developing Packer & Sons for Belvoir season next year. And I'd like to say, Tommy, publicly, I think you're extraordinarily forensic in your work. It is amazing to watch this force of creativity work. He's wide-eyed in his view and he's deeply humane, and I can't think of a better person to come onto the island and announce our next Parsons Fellow.
Thank you very much. Alana, a conduit of spontaneous community expression. I think I've got that right. That beautiful line, a beautiful description of what we're all trying to do. I was at the Theatre Network of New South Wales inaugural gathering last week, and there was a bit of a struggle there to even work out how we should frame ourselves. Are we an industry? Is that the right word for what we're trying to do? And I think you've sort of answered that tonight, Alana. You know, it's important, of course, that we frame ourselves as an industry for so many reasons, that we're workers, we're employers, we expect professional standards, and we want the government to acknowledge the significant contribution we make to the economy. But that description falls short. And it falls short in the way that you've told us tonight, Alana, that it's about more than selling tickets. It's evidenced in the legacy of Philip Parsons and the example of Catherine Brisbane that we're something more than an industry because there are people in this community that are giving something back. Emmy Hoy was the recipient last year of the Philip Parsons Award. And Emmy, I hope, like me, you've experienced this prize to be a mix of, like what we do, that it's both industrious but also about giving you a sense of belonging. Another person, of course, who gives a huge amount back to our community is David Williamson. And I want to pay tribute to him and Shane Brennan and Catherine Brennan and Kristen Williamson as well for this very generous prize that they want to give something back, but they're also giving the opportunity for work. This prize, which is administered through the AWG, the David Williamson Award, mandates that the play is not only commissioned, but staged within, 18 months? Is that right? Staged, yeah. And I've delivered a draft this morning, by the way. And Belvoir won this for Leah Purcell's, their production of Leah Purcell's extraordinary reinvention of The Drover's Wife. And I was so delighted and honoured when Eamon phoned me in January to say that my play looked to be the recipient Packer and Sons would be the recipient, and we're busy delivering that for you next year. As well as that, I just wanted to use this opportunity to say thank you for something more personal as well. And this is also about an experience of community. Some of you might know that this year I've suffered a great tragedy in my life, a huge loss, and with the death of my life partner and fiancé, Dane. And I want to choose this opportunity to say thank you for my colleagues that have helped me so much through this time. And I know that this lifeline I've been given wouldn't be true of other industries. You know, that description does fall short. The support that I've been given in so many practical ways from my colleagues has literally been life-saving. I'm going to be saying thank you a lot for it, but I really wanted to say thank you now. And it's been really practical. People just checking on me, feeding me. Neil Armfield housed me. Belvoir have stored my furniture because I can't get back into my house for a while. Currency Press have extended a residency so that I have an anchor and a professional space to keep on working. That experience of community has been so enriching and affirming during a really very tragic and difficult time. So thank you so much to those people who have supported me. My job here now is to announce the Philip Parsons Award for 2018, and it gives me such pleasure to announce Kendall Fever as this year's prize winner. Kendall is in the UK, I think, where her career is going gangbusters. So to accept the award on her behalf, we have the stars of her show. So I'd like to welcome to the stage, please, Shiv Palakar and Brenna Harding, please.
Unfortunately, Kendall couldn't be here to accept this award, so in the spirit of all things theatre, tonight's role of Kendall Fever will be played by Logie award-winning child star Brenna Harding and ethnically ambiguous minority actor type Shiv Palakar. So Kendall says, I first met Brenna and Shiv 5 months ago when we were in rehearsal for my play, The Almighty Sometimes. Brenna was an appropriate level of excited, but when Shiv was asked why he wanted to do the play, he replied, it's better than serving coffee. And so I offer this speech-giving gig to Brenna and Shiv with a sincere hope that tonight meets or exceeds that benchmark.
This event has a special kind of circularity to it. 10 years ago, in 2008, I was shortlisted for the now-defunct Sydney Morning Herald Young Playwrights Award, a writing competition for high school students. Despite being 18, my mum had to drive me up to Sydney to collect my certificate because at that point I had already failed my driving test 3 times and was determined at the expense of free movement not to be the person who failed a 4th. Tommy Murphy happened to be the judge of this competition. He presented me with my highly commended certificate, and then I was ushered back to my seat. And I still remember sitting there, covered in acne, drowning in low self-esteem, already struggling with the inordinate prospect of being a woman in this world, in this body, in this mind, watching as Tommy Murphy handed the first prize to whatever young so-and-so had trumped my blatant Samuel Beckett ripoff. And I thought, I'm going to be you, Tommy. You don't know this yet, but one day I am going to be a real-life, actual playwright, just like you. I didn't realize at the time how hard it was to write a play, or how few opportunities there were to develop a play, or how difficult it was to then get those plays staged. The next decade was about learning and working and making a lot of coffee for a lot of people, and in the process, shedding all my many misconceptions about writing, including, but not limited to,
1, that if it doesn't come easy or isn't always fun, then you must not be very good at it. Definitely wrong.
2, that writing for theatre means that you will spend the majority of your time in a theatre. Also wrong.
3, that everyone outside of theatre actually knows what a playwright is. The reality is that hardly anyone does, and the few people who do know are mostly surprised that anyone since Shakespeare has bothered to carry on with it. Playwriting, or any creative role really, is often a solitary and lonely pursuit, and at times theatre buildings, once the place of dreams, can start to seem completely impenetrable, which is why this fellowship is so needed and so appreciated and so important. The Philip Parsons Fellowship is a tangible access point met with a ladder that leads to conversation, to relationships, to a sense of community and belonging, and most importantly, to production. For all these things, I am supremely grateful.
10 years later, it is an extraordinary honour and privilege to accept this award via Shiv and Brenna, and in the presence of Tommy Murphy and Alana Valentine, two playwrights I have long respected and admired. I am now a stronger, braver, clearer-skinned, more realistic, but no less determined theatre maker. I still don't know how to drive, and I still battle with how overwhelming it is to be a woman in this world, in this body, in this mind. But now, thanks to Belvoir, I get to funnel all that into art.
So I want to thank Eamon, Sue, Louise, Dom, and Carissa, everyone at Belvoir and Create New South Wales, for opening these beautiful neon-lit pastel-hued doors to me, and for all the dramaturgical advice, support, and guidance that I now know exists on the other side of it.
Thank you for seeing something in my writing. Thank you for seeing it on your stage. And most importantly, thank you for giving me a reason to come home. I cannot wait to write something for this stage.
Thank you. My only task now is to say that's the end of the evening's events. Alana, thank you. Deeply felt thought, as always. Characteristic, beautiful. To the production department and front of house for opening the theatre up on Monday. Please stick around. We're about to launch our next season, our second season of 25A downstairs. Please stay for a drink if you'd like to. And thank you all for coming tonight.